Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this session on financing the energy transition. I'll be the moderator, Eyob Easwaran from the Trade and Development Bank in Nairobi, and I'm here with two distinguished speakers, veterans of the oil and gas industry. To my left is Eric A. Williams, who's President and Principal Consultant of Royal Triangle Solutions, a former Minister of Energy of Trinidad and Tobago with widespread policy, geoscientific, financing expertise in the area, and advising numerous African governments on oil and gas exploration. Delighted for him to be here. And I also have Beall, CEO of Africa Fortesa Corporation, someone who's really cutting his teeth to make exploration happen, looking for financing. So he'll tell us what the challenges are. With that, let's start off by me asking a few questions. Let's first start off, what are the current roadblocks, political, social, economic, or otherwise, for the adoption of carbon power sources? I'll start off with that question, but let me say one thing. What's a crisis for one is an opportunity for another. And current day crisis in the Ukraine with Russia has opened up an opportunity for Africa to explore and sell its natural gas. So I want to combine the two geopolitics challenges along with opportunities and roadblocks for political, social, and economic. With that, let me start off and ask Roger to come in, please.
Thank you. Okay, I think we're working. Well, I mean, the social economic roadblocks and low carbon sources, to me, as you've heard for the last day and a half, it's gas. That is the answer for Africa. The problem is, when I started in this in 1991, only 4 or 5 African countries, sub-Saharan African countries, were producing any gas. And those were coastal companies. And oftentimes that gas was found as a byproduct or associated gas. So the oil production was going on and gas came with it. The roadblocks are simple. Number one roadblock to African gas is in fact financing. It is the single number one roadblock. And with the changes with the Russia attack on Ukraine, and the changes in the stress to the European Union and others, including us here in Africa, the demand for gas, for export gas, is high. Our plan at Fortesa this last 25 years since I formed Fortesa has been domestic gas for domestic use. We have no export plan. But finding Senegalese that are willing to take a risk and take exploration risk has been elusive. And so to me, those are the two roadblocks. The main roadblocks for bringing gas is how does anyone want exploration risk? In fact, as you learned yesterday, the major oil companies are taking no exploration risk worldwide to speak of. And they're just not doing it. So it's up to us as Africans or African-based companies, and Fortesa, of course, is headquartered in Dakar, to take the risk, to overcome the risk, and also to bring African investment into Africa.
Thank you, Rogers. Very early on in my career, I was taught to ask the question, who's going to pay for it? And that's basically what financing is all about. So with that in mind, let me turn my question to Eric. Eric, how is investor sentiment shifting in response to the climate crisis? Africa facing an 8% annual GDP loss in a 2% degree warming scenario, which is part of the biggest transition question, you know? So what's investor sentiment? Give us some insight.
Well, before I go to investor sentiment, I can reframe it and go back to maybe some of the fundamentals to leverage on what Rogers just said and also some of what was presented by His Excellency, Mr. President, yesterday and some of the other ministers. Rogers is correct. How do you pay for the gas? Because the primary uses that are proposed for natural gas throughout the African continent, one is export as LNG, and the other is for electrification, with the hope that the use of natural gas would cause the price of electricity to be reduced. Two things. Those uses of natural gas are as a fuel, and it removes the other use of natural gas as a feedstock. And then secondly, if you're only using it as a fuel to provide electricity, then effectively the person who pays for the electrons is where the revenue flow is going to come to pay for the molecules. And in the domestic situation here in Africa, where, as you quite rightly pointed out, there are certainly economic challenges in most of the societies, ultimately it's the housewife and it's the small factory or small business owner who has to pay for it. Now, the whole business of the export of LNG in deep water then requires investor companies with deep pockets to come to find something that is, in MBA speak, at scale, for it to be worth their risk, the perceived risk in the African space, and provide a return for their investor. And it moves the gas away from the African space. However, with the aspiration for domestic gas, we need to find a way to truly bring the cost in line with what is affordable. And in my own autobiography and where I come from in Trinidad and Tobago, my forefathers discovered that with the use of gas combined as a fuel and as a feedstock, one can then engage in what economists don't like, something called cross-subsidy, where you can end up with a weighted average price that works for the different uses of gas. The creation of an economic cluster where you have the use as a fuel for, say, the petrochemicals, which also requires the use of electricity, then could allow you to scale your electricity so that the price then that goes into the market is the domestic market is effectively one price as opposed to a price within the industrial use. And then that also ties in with another fundamental of economic development. We talk about local content, which you've not mentioned. Local content, people focus on one part of local content. Local content has two parts, a backward linkage and a forward linkage. The backward linkage is the one that gets the notice, which is jobs and services. But the forward linkage is the beneficiation of the gas in a petrochemical, say, type of activity. And that is where the real revenue comes to the country. That then also, because you have it locally, allows you to get the jobs and services. And then with the combination, and then the use of the electricity into that system, then can help to reduce the cost of electricity into the system. It's a symbiotic relationship. And for some reason, we don't seem to be focused on it, and we're going with the narrative that we must only use natural gas as a fuel and not as a feedstock, and use this combination of them to bring down the cost. So for instance, some people who are supplying natural gas for electricity have challenges in getting paid by the electricity companies. And it's because the environment cannot afford to pay to make a return on the gas. We're missing out. And we're shooting ourselves, in my respectful view, in the foot by not trying to combine the two. It's not only a fuel. It's not only for export. It is a fuel and a feedstock. And if it is used as a feedstock in the African space, then there's the opportunity to do a number of other things.
Eric, that's a very important point. And in the African context, the feedstock can be used to produce urea and ammonium for fertilizers, where Africa can use that fertilizer to feed itself. Food security comes into play together with energy security. So power, gas to power, we need electricity. 600 million people in Africa don't have access to electricity. So gas can enable us achieve, electrification. And then it can also achieve, enable us to achieve food security, where fertilizers are going to be a key input. And we have to really take advantage of the total value chain of the gas. Because if we only concentrate on LNG, that goes somewhere else. We won't be able to use it. And we don't have that much use for LNG in Africa to begin with. We don't have heating and cooling needs as in the West, in Europe or in North America, where they really need heating and cooling by natural gas. Here we have the natural heating and cooling system. What we need is electricity and fertilizers. Thank you for that.
Can I just interject?
Yeah, please. Yeah. Please. Yeah.
The other big thing about raising finance, of course, is, as we've all been speaking about, is that in the international space, given the environmental concerns about carbon emissions, again, one can integrate the petrochemical type complexes to reduce the emissions of carbon dioxide. In addition to which, the developed countries are themselves beginning to understand and recognize that carbon dioxide.
Yes, it's on.
Low battery. It says low battery. Yeah, they're beginning to understand that carbon dioxide is not entirely bad. When the price started going up and ammonia plants, there were 2 ammonia plants in the United Kingdom that shut down. There was a big hue and cry that there was no carbon dioxide to put fizz in the beer in the bars. Meat packaging also was suffering. Recently in the United States, they are now discovering the same thing again. Carbon dioxide can be used as a food grade additive. The fizz in our soft drinks and all of that. So again, the byproducts of the molecules that are available to us can be utilized in so many ways. I've been saying this for a number of years in a number of countries. In my time in and around the African continent, fish, for instance, in Nigeria and Ghana, is preserved by smoking it. But some people may want fresh fish. But carbon dioxide could be used to make what we call dry ice, which is a refrigerant, which can be used in an agricultural sense and bring fresh produce to market. One way of getting a lot of dry ice is from the petrochemical industry. There's a whole range of downstream products that can come from the use of natural gas as a feedstock. And in an event where those types of symbiotic projects can be put together, then I think there's an opportunity for them to be more fungible and more fundable in the financing space.
Rogers, please come in. Yeah.
Thank you, Bill. Yes. Am I on? Yeah. I'm thinking what Eric, the point he made is extremely important for local content, because our nation, Senegal, has set up the IMPG. We're training as best we can, excellence in the oil and gas space through IMPG and through the local universities who have done a superior job. Most of the young folks that we've hired this last 20 years came out of the local universities with a master's degree and are now running our company, Fortesa. But looking forward to his second point, for the value added, as I call it, you have, for instance, I think the biggest exporter from Senegal is Indorama, what we call Industrie Chimique de Sénégal. And they're making the phosphoric acid and exporting the phosphate using coal, charbon. And that's imported. It's not a domestic product. They're bringing it in from South Africa. Our CFA goes to South Africa. Our CFA does not get reinvested in our economy here. And the resultant pollution and environmental issues from coal are much worse than from gas. It's the same. One of the best new value-added companies is the excellent Chinese company Twyford in Sandia. They're making all of those beautiful tiles that we see being sold all over Senegal with coal, imported coal from Sandia, right in the heart of our fresh country. And it's the same. Dangote is making all of their cement with coal. So when you understand the employment at Dangote and at Twyford and at Indorama, ICS, these are big value-added employers. And even Socosim is using coal to run the four. Socosim employs 2,000 Senegalese, maybe 2,400. So they're big value-added employers. So the fastest and best way that we can increase social benefits and employment is through value-added, not just everyone working for BP or Woodside or Fortesa, but people working for the value-added industries. And I just named 3 of them. We need 53 more. And if we have cost-effective power, the Senegalese and this economy and MSGBC can compete with international producers. Even when Grand Côte Zircon mines the zircon, it's being exported from Senegal to Norway, where they go ahead and make the rutile, because Norway has cost-effective power and Senegal doesn't. All of that value added could be done here in this economy with more gas. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, off to the next question. What are the unique social and economic advantages that are provided by wind and solar as Africa's power sources, and how does that interrelate with natural gas? So, Eric, why don't you give it a stab?
Oh, hold on. Yeah, when we were preparing for this, I think we came to the conclusion that renewables have a place in the energy mix. They certainly do, but they're not the entire answer. And I think we were of that view, and I certainly am as well. In the rural settings, for instance, where houses are places of abode are sometimes quite separated with large pieces of land in between. And we're in a situation where we don't as yet have, universally have large transmission and distribution networks for electricity. The use of relatively cost-effective renewables is one potential solution for the creation of microgrids. In the urban setting, where the population density is that much greater, and you do have transmission and distribution systems, then of course it is possible that other forms of creation of electricity would be useful. So again, if I go back to my thesis statement, if you can find a way through a different approach to the use of natural gas to bring that price down, I think it would be appropriate in the urban settings, especially with countries that have the natural gas resource and/or which ultimately you could start building out these transmission and distribution systems across borders. There are other renewable projects in the African space. I think there's been a constant look at the potential for hydro, where it is appropriate, and countries are trying to get together to do that. But having said that, we then need to have countries that would start talking with each other and not at each other, and collaborate to bring some of these projects to play. So there's room for both, and Senegal, among other countries, are in fact working to do that, to build out to the 20 to 30 or whatever percentage of use of renewables as appropriate. We're blessed with the sun, for instance, in some of the countries. I saw the previous speaker point out where it would be cost effective, and that's for real. But we were discussing when the clouds are out, you don't get solar. When the wind stops, you don't have. So there's a need for base load, peaking, and there's room for different types of generation.
Thank you, Eric. Let me make this a little bit interactive. Let's also get questions from the participants, because I think that's more, insightful.
Yep.
Yeah, if anybody has any questions to raise or any comments to make based on what has been spoken, please come up. Yeah, in the absence of anyone, I'll let Rogers come in.
Well, on this subject about Africa's cheapest power being solar, it absolutely is not the cheapest for us. The capital expenditure cost of installing solar worldwide is triple. It's 3 times the capital expenditure cost of providing gas, of drilling and providing gas. And one of the key problems in Africa is paying that upfront cost. The governments, the Senegalese government, all the governments in MSGBC have a lot of things to worry about. We have education, we have infrastructure, we have security in this region, we have health care, and we have the cost of education, as I mentioned. So to take the resources and spend triple the cost up front to install solar and take it away from other elements of the budget is very, very difficult for the government. And secondly, in the case of Senegal, we're well above 30% in renewable. The government here has done a marvelous job with hydro, with the help of the World Bank, and with wind and solar. But as Eric mentioned, when the sun isn't shining, there is no solar to speak of at night. Right now, when I was driving out here this morning in the big rain, solar is only giving 10%. You can get solar power when it's raining like this big storm we all drove through, but 10%, so you install 100 megawatts, you're getting 10 megawatts. But these lights are on in this conference center. So solar is not reliable when it's raining. When it's cloudy, solar is making less than 50%. When the temperature is more than 28 degrees centigrade, solar decreases. No one's mentioning that. When the temperature in Ches is 40 degrees, solar is making 25% less power at 40 degrees current, than it is at 28. These are all factors. And secondly, when I talk about CapEx and the cost to the African economies of renewables, the most expensive renewable power possible is offshore wind with batteries. You can't get more expensive. It's off the chart. It's more than 5 times the cost. And the most cost-effective power is clearly what West African Energy is trying to do at Cap de Biche with the 300 megawatts of combined cycle. There's nothing better than gas firing combined cycle. It's what Senegal needs, it's what MSGBC needs. And for that, we need reliable gas. But the heat rate of 50%, the pollution reduction, stop sending the money to another country to import oil, to run reciprocating engines if they can be run on gas. And it's true that the average cost of gas into a combined cycle is 10% more than the average cost of solar. But it's 100% reliable instead of very unreliable as solar is. It's 1/3 the cost up front, and it's 100% consistent. The combined cycle can run 24/7 if it has fuel, and the fuel coming from Senegal, the fuel coming from Guinea-Bissau, the fuel coming from Guinea goes back into the domestic economy. When we're importing oil and sending the money out of the country, the CFA are going out of our economies. There's a huge cost of not reinvesting in Senegal. Thank you.
Thank you. So, how do regional synergies and globalization boost Africa's investment potential for the energy transition? Eric, you want to come in?
You are global
Well, again, we have to define just, and we have to define transition. And I think the ministers yesterday waxed very warm on some of those issues. I've heard several of them say, if I am where I am now is nowhere, what am I transitioning to? And then who defines what is just and what is not just? Just like in any project where you have to find, for instance, if you're trying to do your costing, you have to find a pricing mechanism that works for that project. I believe that in the African space, we need to find a mix of energy production that works. And I think that that is something that is well within the intellectual capacity of Africans to determine.
One thing I want to say, I think we Africans have to be wise and smart about how we play this energy transition game. You know, most times we're being told you have to deploy maximum amounts of renewable energy, and there seems to be a lot of funding for it. You know, let's go for it. Grab the money, use it, but also side by side and in parallel develop our natural gas resources as well to exploit the entire value chain, both on the molecules, usage of molecules and usage of electrons. And I think that way we can have a balanced and expedited manner to which, by which we can meet the energy transition goals. Rogers, please come in.
Thank you, Joe. I mean, I'm very much in favor of regional synergies. I think that this, geologically, it's a region, and I think geologically, it's a region. Okay, thank you. I think geologically, MSGBC is a region, and I think also that the regional synergies for power sharing and cross-border. I mean, the number one cross-border deal I ever saw in my life was between Senegal and Mauritania. I never saw anything done better or faster. So, I mean, these are possible. When you compare that to the fiasco, 11 years it took for the West African pipeline and $78 million in legal fees just to get the gas to Cote d'Ivoire at that time. It was horrible. So I think this region is really setting a good example. As far as globalization, I do not think it's helping MSGBC. I mean, when everything else can be made cheaper in another country, and we buy and import it in containers, and then we sit and buy it at Casino Market or at Hypermarket or on the street, I mean, how is that helping our local economy to have all that stuff manufactured in another area, and we spend our CFA buying it? I don't like globalization. I like taking care of this region, and I've worked 30 years to try to take care of this region, and I'm never going to stop trying to take care of this region. So don't ask me to be positive about globalization.
Yes, please. Yes, somebody from the audience has a comment or a question. Please stand up. Go ahead. Yeah. Can someone provide him with a microphone? Please come forward. Yeah.
Let me just learn yours. Alors, mademoiselle l'hôtesse, est-ce que vous pouvez venir nous aider, s'il vous plaît, à passer le micro dans la salle?
Si.
Je suis un peu vieille pour ces va-et-vient. Donc, comme vous êtes plus jeune et plus athlétique, vous allez m'aider.
D'accord, c'est déjà.
C'est déjà allumé.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your presentation or your talk so far. It's been very, very insightful for me anyway. And my name is Axel Chihomini. I'm a professor of geophysics here at the University of Sheikh Anta Diop. And as you said, Roger, I also relocated from Norway to here to work on this in this region to actually help to build this local content. And I appreciate what you said about the local content and split it into two, like this forward linkage and then the backward linkage, which is, coming to this, my key question is on this local content. And given that I'm in education, I would like to focus on that. And I have the feeling that there have been a lot of talks about training, but there's something really missing here in my understanding. I have to appreciate the fact that the Senegalese government have put in place the INPG. However, from my experience studying and working abroad, I have the feeling that this is more like an elite school. And we should get to the point where we democratize the education. For example, at University of Sheikh Anta Diop, within the Department of Geology, you have to come there and see in the type of environment the students are working in. And there's no sort of investment within at the university to see the impact of what we're talking about here, like the impact of the economy coming from the gas we're going to have. All of these things are still missing. And for me, the university is the backbone of this education we are having. It is the places where you have more access, where you have the students can, a large population can access it. The people with the poor background can access the education at the same level as those who want to go at the IMPG. I think we should really focus also on putting investment into the local universities, not just building buildings, but actually putting a lot of infrastructures, technical infrastructures, and stuff to make it possible for us to reach to the level of to be competitive with the others. Thanks. That was my opinion.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. That was very insightful, because we're talking about local content, and if I see across the room, we're all gray-haired people. Where are the young ones? If we don't have the young ones, who's going to replace us? So, we need to conference organizers, whenever we organize conferences, we need to include young people along the same line of, profession that will replace us and bring them in and learn from our experiences, or else it will be a mute exercise. Having said that, please come in, Rogers.
Sure.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you, Professor. Yeah, I mean, that was my point earlier, is that when the governments of MSGBC are required to take some of the expenditure that they have available in the budget and to pay 3 times the capital expenditure to do what is good for somebody. And I breathe the air too. I don't want pollution. But I'm just saying money is finite. The biggest problem is getting money invested. When the government has money and can't do better in the education because they're putting in renewables that cost 3 times as much, it's a detraction from the needs of the nation. The needs of the nation are healthcare, infrastructure, security, education, and we can't just do everything if the budget is X, it can't be X plus 2, or the government can't pay its bills.
Let's go. Time is running up. I have one last question. So, how do you foresee the interface between natural gas, green hydrogen, and renewables in the African setting? Please come in.
You go first. No, it's you.
Okay, well, again, just to say to the professor, Rogers is a geologist, and I'm a double major, geology and geophysics. So you have our empathy. And I think to answer another part of answering the question was, certainly one has to create the capacity for the students to get jobs. And that can happen by the increase in activity in the particular area of specialization domestically. Green hydrogen, well, I think I saw the piece where there are areas in which green hydrogen is possible if you have cheap electricity. Again, there are all kinds of other innovative solutions. But blue hydrogen is also quite possible, again, if you have a vibrant petrochemical industry. And it's well known the technology exists to create blue hydrogen. And I think if you're using your natural gas resource to, again, into the petrochemical type of activity, you could start with blue hydrogen, which becomes an additional stream of revenue in your business, in the overall combined business plan of such an activity, while at the same time working towards the maturity of the projects and the technologies that may speak to green hydrogen. Because in spite of all of the conversations about it now, a lot of these technologies are still not mature.
Just to quickly comment on green hydrogen, it's a wonderful concept. It's not practical almost anywhere in the world today. As you've heard all week, or this last day, we have 600 million people in Africa with no access to electricity. So we're supposed to take the electricity we have and make hydrogen with it instead of letting people have an industry come here for value added, because the value added is where the big employment is going to come from. So I think in some sequence, green hydrogen is wonderful. But today we're trying to come up. It's not a transition for us. We don't have electricity in the right amount for this nation or for the region. Why should we use what we have to make hydrogen? Green hydrogen is made from renewable energy. And we have number 1 in the region in Senegal in renewable energy. But we don't have enough power. Gas is the only solution. It's the near solution. It's in this region. MSGBC is loaded with gas. We need to get it onshore. We need to get it for public power. And we need to get it for value-added industry to bring employment to this region.
Let me wrap the session up. Green hydrogen, we should ask who's going to be the ultimate user and at what cost is it going to be produced. Let's keep that in mind. Okay, one last question, please.
Anna Roger won't let me speak French. So I would like to hear more about agriculture, because this oil and gas industry has a lot of equipment, and I hear a lot of drilling. And knowing that all the arable land that we have in Africa, if we just have water, if we just address the water and the fertilizer issues, I know Africa could feed the rest of the world. So I would like really to see how we can really put in the mentality of this oil and gas industry to have a specific focus on agriculture. I've been asking Roger for years that, you know, if we have boreholing around Senegal, then, you know, we will have sufficient food. So I would like to see how the oil and gas industry would address water and fertilizer to help agriculture in Africa.
Sure. Well, you addressed a very important point. Water is critical both for gas to power, because in an African setting where average temperatures are over 30 degrees centigrade, you need some serious cooling to maximize the power output of power plants. So water is critical there for cooling towers. And again, on the feedstock side, if you want to produce ammonia or urea, you need large amounts of water. And those large amounts of water with ammonia and urea can be used to generate fertilizers. So water is critical. And what we really need to focus upon is collocation of natural gas resources with water resources, so that we don't go far looking for water and spending more. If we can collocate water and natural gas, then we have a win-win situation where we can generate power, produce urea and ammonia right by the, by the wellhead, and that would be tremendous cost savings. But I think, again, this requires an integrated approach in resource usage. First and foremost, what are we going to use the resource for, and how can we maximize it? So you integrate agriculture with energy, with power, and then combined, your cost of capital will also be reduced, because you're going to generate different streams of revenues from different products, and you'll have a very economically feasible project. So I think it needs a very integrated approach. Thank you. I hope that suffices, or else I'll ask, please come in, Eric. Yeah.
Well, gas is a fuel, gas is a feedstock. If we combine the two, we have a chance.
And just on a different point, back to the hydrogen, which is not any infrastructure here to use hydrogen, not one vehicle, not one power plant, period. The hydrogen has about half the heating power of methane, and it's 4 times as explosive, dangerous. So, I mean, come on. We need to stay practical and stay with what works, and we need to do it now.
Well, with that, long live natural gas, and we'll, close the session. Thank you all.